and people cannot really afford to move in. And then I don't know how you can enforce. Yeah, I just have some serious concern. And then on the dishwasher it says within commercial units. I mean, I don't know what that means, commercial. I mean, I know what commercial means, but
well, no, it's open for interpretation. I mean, the IECC, we changed the definition of what commercial construction is versus what it is in the IBC. So yeah, it's a
So on most residential projects that we are doing right now, the Energy Star label, basically it comes if you need to get a green code and you earn certain points for it. And it's basically, usually is the same light, the same fan. It just, the sticker is worth $50 more to buy. I mean, that's what it comes down to. And I think the appliances are pretty efficient to begin with. So anyway, I'm against it. In case you guys didn't realize that already, but
well, is anybody want to speak in favor of it? If not,
I would speak in favor of it only if in the context of, can we make it work? Can you inspect it? And then if we can get past that, then we could have a debate perhaps about whether it should be in there. But can you get past the fact of signing off on a C of O when they haven't even bought the equipment yet?
So on the dryers, what we do, although they haven't bought the dryers, usually we put the cat seat of the dryer as the basis of design. So, but then, but we don't really have control over wherever they buy.
Well, that's why I brought it. It is an example, and you require you put a sign on the exhaust connection, right? That says that you count it on a high static dryer, right?
Well, the sign is a different. It's just basically to warn upon replacement or
that's right.
Purchase. Yeah.
But that's because it's a life safety issue if you do something wrong. And so it's not exactly equivalent. That's why I say, can we get past that part? Can we get past the how do you inspect?
So welcome, Jeff. I just wanted to bring you up to date. We're currently talking about the automatic clothes washer and dishwasher requirements proposal. Efficiency. And the main concern is that neither one of these appliances are required to be installed at certificate of occupancy. And so they're not required to be there for inspection. So we're not really sure how we would enforce it. As well, there's the question of federal preemption. Are we allowed to require something more restrictive than what the federal government requires minimum for these appliances in minimum IPC? Now, there's a similar proposal in Denver Green Code that has been approved for Energy Star appliances, but just in the IPC as a minimum, I think there might be challenges with not only enforcement, but as we're talking about is the federal preemption.
Okay, thanks.
So I'll just say not approved. Anybody voting in favor? Mark, you're voting in favor of not approving or in favor of?
Oh, I'm sorry. Ask me again.
So I'll just say all not in favor.
Yeah, not in favor here.
Yep.
Not in favor.
I'll raise
not
my
in
hand.
favor.
Okay. All right. Well, moving on. Next proposal is the elevator amendment. So this proposal has my name on it, but background on it is Mike Stewart with the Denver Fire Conveyance Group sent an email and requested that this be added to the mechanical code. And so this is straight from ASME A17.1 code language that allows, because the mechanical code is pretty strict about not allowing anything in a hoistway, and this kind of defines it a little more specifically what would be allowed or not allowed. And so this is language that is intended to be straight from A117.1, which will align what Denver Fire Conveyance Group enforces, and also aligns with what the state of Colorado enforces. So that's the intent of this proposal.
Chuck, I have been dealing with this issue for a while, and I do have some concerns with the way it's written right now. If it's okay to go ahead and talk about it.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so there's actually multiple issues, and I don't think they're really addressed on this amendment. And I think this amendment is kind of written, it looks like, did you write that, or was it Mike Stewart?
Mike Stewart.
Mike Stewart. Yeah, it does look like it's written by an elevator guy with not a lot of, yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
So there's like 2-3 big issues. So one has to do with the shaft, the elevator shaft. Okay. So, and it's the same thing on the fire code too. So what happened is usually you're not allowed to have, you're allowed to be inside the shaft, but not on top of the elevator machine. Okay. So basically, in order to be inside the hoistway, only the elevator guys are allowed to do that, and they're charging $750 an hour. And so if there's a smoke detector, it's a big problem. So that's why they kind of like, they don't allow the smoke detectors anymore on top of it either. So usually what we do for the shaft is we build an enclosure on the side of it that is 2-hour rated, that is accessible from the side, but not inside the shaft. So basically the language for that is you can have an AC unit, but the equipment cannot be on top of the machine. It needs to be somewhere on the side. It's a 2-hour rating, and it is part of the shaft, serving the shaft. And there's no water above it. There's no, you don't need to be on top of the cab to access it. There's a access panel of some sort. So, okay, so that's part number one. Part number two, there's elevator equipment rooms, and every elevator is completely different. And then what's happening with those elevators, the elevator guys, when during design, if you can find them, they say, oh, we don't need a room. We just need a little closet. And that's kind of like true, but you cannot really put an AC unit inside because it's always above some kind of equipment. So Mike will go to inspect, and he will say, well, that AC unit is above the equipment. It needs to be moved, but there's no room. So one is the hoistway, the other is the elevator equipment room. And it just needs to get simplified to say, provide the AC unit dedicated to the hoistway. It cannot be on top of the cab. And that language is on the IFC right now on the amendments with some of that. So that's one for the hoistway. For the equipment room, it just needs to say the AC unit cannot be above the elevator equipment room. And sometimes, and I don't know recently with Mike, but it will be, usually we put it right above the door, so we know there's nothing underneath it. But sometimes, even if there's a little conduit, he kind of objects to it. So anyway, so those are the two things. And then when they have the equipment on the job, I mean, there's no way to cool it. I mean, it's just on the elevator job. So anyway, but what I'm trying to say is there's just way too much information here, and I don't know that we're communicating the message correctly. So anyway, I'll stop mumbling.
Mhm.
So Michael, let me ask you, so did the IFC committee have a similar elevator amendment this code cycle that's been proposed?
Yeah, and it says basically you cannot have a smoke detector on top of it. I forgot it's basically a wire that senses the. For that reason, because they don't want anybody inside the shaft servicing smoke detectors or AC units or anything like that. We used to put it inside the shaft like 10, 15 years ago, and then it was the wrong thing to do. So we started moving it on the side.
Mhm.
But then the architects kind of like have a problem with that sometimes because they say, well, if it's a stick build, we cannot do a 2R rated enclosure. So, and there's some tricky details associated with it, but you basically need to attach it to the 2R rated enclosure. There's just a lot of confusion on this issue. And I have like many pictures of how to do it right or wrong, but anyway.
Let me address a couple of those things that you brought up, Mike. I think that, Michael, there's what all that you said is right. And usually my advice when working on design team was, let's find some other option than putting it in whatever it is. This is, I mean, we don't have much option when it comes to sump pumps, but I've talked design teams into, piping the the drain outside of the hoistway, just so you don't have to get a $750 an hour guy in there. But that's kind of a design comment. Let's design it better for the owner. It's interesting. I didn't realize that's what they did in the fire code, because every other on this side of Sheridan, you're going to have detectors at the top of the hoistway if you've for elevator recall. So a couple of those things are just design concerns. I'm curious because are you seeing it being interpreted that you can't penetrate a hoistway similar to a stair shaft? A hoistway is not an exit enclosure. I've usually done it so that you just have a fan coil outside the hoistway, fire damper as it goes into the hoistway, and you're done.
Yeah, you cannot put a fire damper because it's for emergency use, so that damper cannot close.
See, and if that's something that is being interpreted by Denver Fire, that ought to be in here because it doesn't say that otherwise. There's nothing in the code that says you can't have a fire damper it'd be a fire smoke because it's a shaft. The only thing that shows up in the code is that this is a shaft, and a duct penetration of a shaft requires a smoke fire damper. It's a stair enclosure, a exit enclosure that you can't even penetrate with a damper. Now, I understand that elevator inspectors seem to be in their own little world, and it does not surprise me at all that there is a double secret requirement to not penetrate hoistways. If that's what Denver wants to do, let's put it in here.
Well, once you have the opening on the hoistway, basically it's part of the hoistway, and you're allowed to do that. It's an enclosure. It's part of the hoistway. It doesn't
show me in the. But if you were a plan reviewer and I chose to fight the law, I'd ask you, show me in the code where it says I can't have penetrations in a hoistway. It ain't there.
Yeah.
So, but if Denver wants it, let's put it in there.
Yeah, I think you can have penetration as long as it's serving the hoistway. Yeah, that's not an question, I think. The question is if the AC unit, it cannot be above the cab, basically.
Well,
it needs
okay.
to be accessible.
Then if that's an interpretation, here's the beautiful thing about this, Chuck, is that we have the opportunity to bring all these double secret requirements in there because there is no actual written requirement that says it can't be above the cab. What it does say is that things can't be above the elevator equipment. And that hadn't been an issue until they started putting MRL motors on the top of a cab. So what does Denver want to do? And let's take this opportunity to do it.
Yeah. So on 303.8.3, it does say safe and convenient access within the elevator machine space, machine room. It doesn't say the hoistway, but I mean, that's the.
Well, anymore, the hoistway is a machine space with MRL units with the motor on top. So again, what does I get it all. And I, as a designer, I'd very much like to see the actual unwritten policies be written. Because it works the other way too. In Chuck, we talked a little bit or corresponded a little bit. I had a couple of, I have a bunch of, some of them are wordsmithing kind of options, but as an example, it says you can have steam piping in there. It does not mention the word condensate. How do you do steam piping without condensate? I know it's been interpreted fine. I haven't had a problem with that. It says, you know, supply pipes somewhere. What about return pipes? You know, this is, as you said, it's written by, now this is mostly words directly out of ASME, and I kind of forget what ASME stands for, but I don't think they have any mechanical engineers.
And a lot of the code is written from the A. and unfortunately, if that goes through, man, that is going to create more questions than answers. And it is challenging to get the TCO. I mean, those elevators are done 4 weeks after we're supposed to get TCO. And, you know, I remember on the R Hotel, Mike Stewart rejected us 3 times on that AC unit. So it can get, it is very open to interpretation.
No, and it sounds like the majority of the enforcement of these provisions and the lack of clarity of where these provisions come from are out of the fire conveyance inspections. So in order to get everything that Denver as a whole, including Denver Fire Conveyance, we would need them to be part of this conversation to ensure we get everything detailed.
Chuck, I just sent you a picture of how usually it looks like. I don't know if you can open it, but and actually have many different types of installations. But so to the left is the hoistway, and then you put the AC unit with a big access panel and 2 R-rated enclosure, and that keeps it out.
So the hoistway over here.
Yeah.
So the AC units here, and so it's just. So this is built as a 2R enclosure, kind of an extension from the elevator.
That's right. So technically, it's inside the hoistway, and then I'll send you a picture on the machinery room that Mike rejected like 4 times. There was just no room inside the elevator equipment room. I mean, there was just, it was a bad situation because the architect listened to the elevator guy. He says, you don't need to provide as much. And yeah, it was, I need to find my damn picture now.
Yeah, that's a good solution, Michael. And I guess if it's required to not have a penetration, right? And the only reason you did this is because you didn't want to have a duct going through that hole with a fire smoke damper in it. if that is Denver's requirement, we need to write it down.
And the code says that the AC unit needs to work during, and the sump pump during emergency, and it needs to be on EM power.
Right.
So technically, you cannot have a damper that will close accidentally, or even if there's
Well,
a smoke, you don't want to close it. I mean,
that's
you
cool.
want to, yeah, keep it.
And therefore, let's write it down if that's the way that Denver wants to look at it. I could argue the point, but I don't want to. What does Denver want to do? I'm on board with that. Let's just write it down.
Yeah, I think the challenge, I mean, I think the reason why this amendment was proposed in the first place is because the mechanical code specifically says, like, mechanical systems shall not be located in an elevator shaft.
Right.
Period. And
period.
The idea is, well, with the MRL equipment, like you've talked about with the equipment on the top, you need to be able to cool it. And that's where we've run into the challenges of how do you cool it without having it in the shaft?
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think that, like, this is a good solution, what Michael's proposed here.
Mm-hmm.
How do we codify it?
Yeah.
Well,
We just
could
need
it
to make
just
sure-
be written to say that mechanical systems not serving the elevator cannot be in the elevator shaft?
a direct above, it's on the fire code right now. It cannot be above the equipment.
Right.
And it needs to be, actually that 303.8.3, where it says safe and convenient access within, instead of machinery. Well, I'll talk to you about the machinery really quick. I sent you 2 more pictures, Chuck. Some of that language is good language. And then we don't really need to dictate if, I don't know anybody that's using Steam. So that's the job that Mike Stewart rejected us like 3-4 times. So if you open the next picture, Chuck, that I sent. So the room was like packed.
Mm-hmm.
And we put the AC unit above the doors, but the AC unit was still above the equipment. And I think Mike says, no way. I mean, that cost us like 2-3 weeks on the schedule. So I said, fine, we'll just build a 2-hour rated enclosure outside the room with an access, and that's how we'll get away with it. So that's for the equipment.
Yeah, so I apologize. My internet doesn't like me doing more than 1 or 2 things at once on my computer. It freezes. I'm almost suggesting that if there's a similar fire amendment that's being proposed, that we coordinate with fire and update this. And so I would say, I think there's agreement that there should be some, this section needs to be amended to address the real world situation of there needs to be air conditioning or AC equipment in an elevator shaft. And it sounds like fire is addressed how to do it without doing it over elevator equipment. And we would want Tony and Michael Stewart's input on making sure it's correct.
I think it needs to be simplified into maybe 3 paragraphs. Hoistway, equipment room, it needs to be accessible, and it does not need to be above the equipment room. And Chuck, if I can add one more thing. So it needs to comply with the elevator manufacturer's requirements. So all of them, they say the hoistway can be up to 104 degrees. So technically, you probably don't need cooling. But what happened is, as soon as something goes wrong with the elevator, they charge $750 an hour to go and take a look. So on our side, we just put AC unit because what happens is something wrong with their equipment, they blame it immediately that there's no AC. But on their specs, it says you can go up to 104 degrees. And even without AC, you should be able to go 100. I mean, I don't think it gets that hot.
I'm probably 50-50, maybe even more unconditioned than conditioned, but yeah.
All right, Michael, would you confirm with me the four things you'd like addressed? Again, hoistway. The four paragraphs.
Hoistway, equipment room. Mm-hmm.
Equipment room, in compliance with elevator specs, and then mark the openings into the elevator.
Mm-hmm. And clarification if it's if there's an issue with putting equipment above the cab or above the equipment, and you get exactly how you define the difference between cab and equipment is a good question, because well, first of all, I ran into a wacky installation where they put a hydraulic elevator machinery inside the hoistway, but of course that's below everything. So
Yeah, that's
so
yeah. I think the key word, Jack, is the equipment needs to be accessible, and it is basically where it says safe and convenient access within the hoistway, and yeah, without being on inside the hoistway, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So on that 303.8.3, there's some good language we can cut and paste.
So is the idea that this will go back for revision then, Chuck?
Yeah, I mean, and I don't think we would probably have a whole nother hearing or another, but what I would do is I would coordinate probably with Danny, Tony, Carroll, and Mike Stewart and make sure we get the proposed language, and then I'd share it with this group and look for comment.
Yeah,
and just,
we want to find out what I'm suggesting is that what are the things that Mike has a problem with, and we designers keep saying, but it doesn't say that. If he wants, for instance, it is a good outcome. I understand the outcome to not even have a duct or a smoke detector at the top of a hoistway. It's just you got to say it, because otherwise the code doesn't say that. Because safe and convenient access for the guy riding on the top of the cab is, well, that's actually I've done it. It's actually pretty convenient to get on top of the cab and get to the top of the hoistway. It's just once the building's in operation, people like me I can't do that anymore.
And Jack, if you guys want to call me and we can go over it a little bit more, or I'll be happy to.
Yeah, I mean, we may, I'll have an initial, I'll reach out to Tony and Michael Stewart, and we'll have an initial conversation about this and try to get the fire code amendment and our amendments aligned.
Yeah.
And try to make sure that whatever is being interpreted or enforced by a conveyance group is captured here. And then if it's easily coordinated, we'll just send out the information. If not, maybe I'll reach out and schedule, see if you guys are up for a 30-minute meeting. I hate to take more of your guys' time, and we really appreciate the time you guys have already shared with us to help with these amendments.
It takes us more than 30 minutes to have a discussion with Mike in the middle of a project.
True.
And Jack, in my opinion, nothing should be allowed to be inside the vertical portion of the hoistway. I mean, no pipes, nothing. It just needs to be bare concrete on the vertical portion of it. And especially water. I mean, it will be no water, period. And then there's some stuff with regards to refrigeration quantities and stuff like that. I don't know that we really these I don't know if there's that much worth of refrigerant on a split system.
I would agree on that. The quantity involved with that probably is, especially the volume of the whole shaft or the hoistway, not a concern.
First of all, it's still not a concern, but the only time it even come close is if we were to somehow apply a VRF system there, and I'll bet you that Mike would have a problem with that because it's not dedicated to the hoistway or to the equipment. Once you dedicate a 2 or 3 ton unit, you've limited the refrigerant quantity. And besides, a lot of my comments are because Mike tried to beat ASME 17.1 into the code. I think it'd be a lot simplified if it was more integrated. And as an example, the you don't need to say it again. It's already stated in chapter 11.
I was going to ask the same thing, Mark, about if there's any duplicated language between the two. It'd be best if we do not do that, because we all know this language has a tendency to continue to change. So it'd be best to only include the things that are hot button issues. So.
But I do think it's a very good idea to have an amendment or some clarity on this issue.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, just hearing this conversation, it's obvious that what's being required isn't clear to the design community right now. So that, yeah, I totally agree.
And right now, the architects are kind of like forcing us to put it inside the horseway, like on top of the cap, and that's a horrible idea. And then they say, well, I look at the code and it's not disallowed.
Well, I really appreciate the conversation on this one. I have homework on this one, and I will reach out here in the next few weeks when we get some clarity on this. So I appreciate that. Let's move to the next one. Let's see. Above ground duct systems.
Hey, Chuck, I'm going to probably take off. I think the only one I was looking at was the washing machines that's in scope for me. So
no problem, Jeff. Thanks for stopping by.
Sure. Thank you. Bye.
This was a public proposal by Robbie Schwartz, and he has not joined the phone call, so he's not going to be defending this or proposing this. But this is really to limit the areas in an IRC house where you can use the stud wall cavities as a duct. So shall be permitted only between transfer air between 2 rooms or spaces on the same level would be the only places that the stud cavities would allow this. The energy code.
I guess my overall comment is that, first of all, I don't have a big dog in the fight here in my professionally. This is not what I do. But I do understand the issue. I'm wondering how big of a deal it is. And I note that the proponent put, no effect on cost of construction, and that just can't be true. You pan studs and joists because it's easier and cheaper. I guess I understand the issue. I'd want to understand how big of an impact it is, and is that something that we want to do in Denver?
Yeah, I agree with Mark. Eh, when I read it, it doesn't seem to me that is, maybe I'm not reading it correctly, that is disallowing. It says shall be permitted for transfer air between two rooms or spaces on the same level, but it doesn't say you cannot do it in multiple levels. I guess I'm not quite sure. The way
It also
sounds.
took out language on the fire resistance rated assembly. Now, if you're talking about a dwelling unit, you wouldn't be crossing a fire resistance rated assembly. But, it seems like the base code that was there prior had more descriptive language in it. So,
Yeah, and so one of the challenges with this section is that like section R403.3.7 in the IECC, so in the energy code, section R403.3.7 says building framing cavities shall not be used as ducts or plenums. And so it requires that those, in Denver, we currently require those to be panned with duct. And I don't think, I guess I'm still not seeing that this would prohibit that practice.
I think the intent was to minimize where just the plain old stud wall cavities are being used now, and also again, not my area of expertise, but my understanding of the concept of panning means one flat piece of sheet metal across the bottom of floor joists, and the other three sides are two studs and the floor above.
Yeah, so currently in Denver, based on this, because this isn't new, and I think it's in the 2018 as well, that you're not allowed to use, in the energy code, you're not allowed to use the stud cavity space. And so I think I believe the proponent's intent here is to align the IRC and IECC.
Chuck, is that
goes into detail.
IECC limitation only on the exterior building envelope construction, or is it also restricted, just within the building, not envelope?
It's silent, so I would say it's any building cavity.
Mm-hmm. The interesting thing in where one code says you can do it and the other code says you can't is a valid concept, if not actual case law, I suppose, would be that the more restrictive applies. So the IECC is, if it's clear that it's not just perimeter spaces or envelopes, walls rather, if it's prohibited there, well, it's prohibited here. If we prohibit furnaces in the energy code, you can't come to the mechanical code and say that, yeah, but here's a whole section on furnaces. So the simple answer would be to do nothing if indeed it's already prohibited. And then just make sure that's consistently applied.
Yeah. Hey, Lewis, are you there? Are you able to?
Yep, I'm here.
Are we, am I accurate on for residential houses right now, we don't allow stud cavities to be used anywhere in the structure for
Yep.
supply or plenum? They have to be lined with sheet metal?
Well, we've still been letting them use cavities because it's in the IRC, but that's only return. You can't use either stud or joist cavities for supply. All supply has to be ducted, and there's also, you cannot use stud cavities on outside walls for return. That's also in the code.
Mhm.
But we have been letting them do the pan joist or wall stud space as long as it's only serving one level.
Okay. So as you can see in the base code, the base mechanical code does indeed cover the outside walls of building envelope assembly shall not be utilized. But it does allow, 7.1 shall not, oh, I'm sorry, and supply. That's what I meant to say is 7.1. These cavities shall not be used as plenum for supply air. So those are already covered. Okay. Which is why it's interesting that this proponent struck some of that stuff out. I might, if we're going to wordsmith this, I might look at some of those exception, or they're not really exceptions, but conditions. So I think what I heard Lewis say is that the way you're applying it is the way that it's written.
Yeah, and that's how it's been. Because right now the IRC and the energy code kind of conflict each other.
I'm trying to search that section in the IECC
Yeah,
and I'm
thank you.
coming up short. Is there, I'm curious if there's a section reference perhaps?
And I'm out in the field right now, so I don't have all my stuff with me, so I'm at a disadvantage right now.
Okay. So Matt, are you able to find R403.3.7?
One second. Oh, bear with me just a minute.
Was it C403 or
Is it
R403?
C? Yeah, because R is a different
Yeah, it's R403.
Ah,
R403.3. R4, wait a minute. In the IRC?
no,
the
in
IECC R403.3.7.
Okay. Okay. Ducts located.
building framing cavities shall not be used as ducts or plenums. That's straightforward. I agree. Yep. That's even more restrictive than what this proponent is going for.
Yeah. The transfer air opening is
I mean, it seems to me what Luis described is my understanding too. Is basically all supplies ducted, and then you're allowed to use the cavity for return. Is that correct? I mean, usually they
Right,
just sit metal right on one side of the joist, and then whatever space is available is your returner.
correct. And we
Mhm.
still make them seal that space, whether doesn't matter on what the construction is. If it's wood joist or wall studs and drywall, we still make them seal that cavity to
Yeah.
make it airtight. But it's only, the way it's being enforced right now is it's only to be used for return air. All supply has to be ducted. You can't use any outside walls for a return cavity, and it can only serve one level.
So there is a duct leakage test requirement now in the 21 code for ducts within the conditioned space, which is different. So I'm wondering, would it still pass the leakage test if it was panned?
Well, if it's return air, I don't know that really matters. I mean, somehow return is return. I mean, it just, you grab from wherever you want to grab.
And the proponent of this is very opposed to that. He thinks that that is not energy efficient.
Well, the only problem with the energy efficiency is kind of like at my house. I cannot return the air from the second floor to the basement, but that's because I only get half an inch from my furnace external, and there's just the returner is never big enough. It's not really related to the leakage. I mean, some of it is a little bit leakage, but I don't think it's the reason. My only concern with this is I don't want to create any confusion and add construction costs to a market that is already burdened with. It seems to me the way Louis described it is sufficient. I don't know if we need to change it.
Yeah, and what we're seeing now, probably half of the contractors are doing all ducted return, and maybe probably the other half are still trying to pan joist space and wall cavities, but we are seeing a lot of them where they're ducting it now.
The main, right?
Well, even the like if they put ducted returns in the bedrooms on the upstairs level, then a lot of them will try to pan the joist space and the stud space to get those returns in all those upper bedrooms. Other ones they'll run duct work and oval duct in the joist space or in the wall stud space.
Well, I got to respect the argument about it being a conflict with the IECC, because even if the IECC meant, only the exterior envelope walls, which kind of makes sense that, if you suck on them, you're increasing the infiltration rate, but that's not what it says. It just says it shall not, use the duct or the joist and stud space as a plenum, period. End of statement. Therefore, an easy answer is to strike the entire section of, well, I'm not entire, but bottom line to say that same thing. In other words, don't try to find the places where you can use stud and joist spaces. Just say you can't use it, period. It's like the IECC does. Or you almost have to change the IECC to downgrade it to allow what the IMC does. And the third option for the city of Denver is to publicize it as a policy, recognizing the conflict, and say that Denver's policy is to follow the energy code.
Yeah, for us, I think the biggest problem right now is the two codes conflict each other.
Right.
Well, I do have concern about using, because the return ductwork is still going to need to be duct tested. And will be able to pass.
Yeah, if the concern is leakage, it's covered by the duct leakage requirement. And if you can tape and pan seal the stud cavities well enough to equal a duct. I don't know what the difference is.
Right. And like some of the contractors now that are ducting the return, like they'll have a trunk line return trunk, and instead of using a joist space, they break up a 3-sided sheet metal that they stick up in between the floor joists, nail it off, and then they put a piece of sheet metal or like panning at the bottom to create that sheet metal duct. I don't know what the big difference is between that and if you seal the joist to the subfloor. You know, it's a cavity. Yeah, the one's just lined with sheet metal.
An interesting way the proponent put that is it gives the contractor a greater chance of success. And that's what the issue is that, you know, one attitude to take is, well, let the contractor figure it out. If they fail duct leakage testing, yeah, what you can do about that? But I also I get it that it probably impacts inspectors' time if you don't do it right the first time. So that would be Denver's interest in prohibiting the use of joist and stud space, is to increase the chance for success, because it still is it's a failed system if the duct leaks or if the pan joist leaks.
Right. And a lot of things can happen at the job site after we do our rough inspection.
Yeah.
You know, whether they're ducting the return or using pan in the joist space. You know, a lot of those eye joists have knockouts built into them, and we'll do our rough inspection. Then electrical comes through and knocks all the knockouts and runs their electrical. We don't know if it got sealed up. You know, and that's stuff we can't be there 24/7 policing.
Now, going back to the what's the impact to builders? I bet builders would say that's a feature, not a bug. Is that all I got to do is poke through the eye joist, and I don't even have any sheet metal to deal with. All I got to do is poke through the eye joist, and I can run my conduit or Romex.
Right. And a lot of times electrical's roughed in when we do our inspection, so you know we make sure that those openings are sealed. But like I say, what happens after we leave, who knows? You know. But I'm kind of in agreement with Danny, where the duct leakage would or should show if there's any issues there.
So that would be the justification to reduce the requirement of the energy code and allow for panning, right? Because it's going to be caught by duct testing anyway. But we have to resolve a conflict here between the two codes. And we can change the energy code, we can change the mechanical code, or we, like I said, maybe just write a policy that advertises which one you're actually going to follow. So that's one, but we can justify allowing pan joist construction if we also acknowledge that it's, the go no go is the testing.
Right.
I personally don't understand the air leakage test on a single family house. I mean, it on the returner side. But anyway, I mean, I get it for a commercial space, or if you want to go multiple floors. But I mean, once it returns, it just returns from the house. I mean, the biggest problem in the house is, the basement is 5-6 degrees difference between the returner temperature. And my basement is 68, upstairs is 75. So anyway.
And then that the R403.3.7 isn't found in the commercial code and our, amendments that direct IRC townhomes to the commercial code would not have to do this. They wouldn't have to adhere to this. So that's another conflict.
Yeah. You're on mute, Mark.
Yeah, Mark, you're on mute.
I think it doesn't even come up in commercial because with the latest version of 601 or 2, whatever it is on Plenums, even in a type 5 building, you can't use wood construction in your plenum. So I think commercial is covered. There was a time when if the building was allowed to be built out of wood, then your plenum could be wood. But now it's all materials shall be 2550.
Are you, I'm curious, are you seeing a high percentage of those townhomes you're just describing being told to follow the commercial energy code as opposed to the residential code? Because we've run into that before where the question is which code do we follow, and 9 times out of 10 we're told commercial. I'm just curious how that's been happening.
So in the IECC, we defined, and it started last code cycle, we defined all multifamily residents, regardless of height, to be R2, or all R2s are follow the commercial portion of the code. So all of the IRC townhomes, any apartment building 3 stories or less, all follow the commercial.
Yeah, okay. So they fall into that category, Mark, where we're already avoiding plenums in this fashion. So this is likely applied mostly to single family residences then, or smaller residential properties.
But the interesting conflict is we only change that definition only applies to the energy code, or how it applies to the energy. So
Right.
An IRC townhome still follows the IRC, which would be this, not the IMC.
That's right. This piece that's under review here. Yes.
Mm.
Well, we get 55 minutes left. What do you think?
Yeah.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Michael.
Right.
Sorry, Chuck.
No, I appreciate that a little. So does anybody have any proposed edits to this? So I guess we'll just put it up for a vote. Who's in favor of adopting it as is? Nobody. Who's in favor of not approving this?
Oh,
Well, modifications, but I was thinking about that, Chuck. So let me chime in with the first question. What would we propose? As long as I'm not missing something here, item 7 in this is that's the only thing that talks about stud cavities, right? And it was the base code was trying to, tell you where you can, where you can't. The proposal was trying to limit it even beyond that. If we were to make it consistent with the energy code, I think the simple answer is stud wall cavities and spaces between solid floor joists shall not be permitted. Period. Done. Now it's consistent with the IECC. If that's what we want to have happen, that's maybe the question for the group here is. We wanted to be consistent. I'm pretty sure that we'd all answer yes. Now, do we want to be consistent that with the IECC, or do we want the IECC to be consistent with the IRC?
My opinion is for a single family home. I don't see cost benefit analysis of fully ducted the return air. I think probably what's already for a single family house.
And I would agree. It's required to be duct tested. It'll be required to be tested anyway. Louis, do you have any thoughts on this?
I'd agree with you and Michael on that, you know, being just for the single family.
Okay. So,
But this is for all, this covers all R2s built in under the, I'm sorry, that's, well, yeah, R2s under the residential. This is the residential. Yeah.
so are you seeing that same design in IRC townhomes as well, Louis?
Not as much. Most of those are ducted, but it's a lot of it. You know, a lot of times it depends on the contractor and, you know, what their game is. You know.
Well, I would assume in an IRC townhome, just the pure fact of the multi-stories and the multiple levels that they're in this, the base code being limited to one level would probably limit the use of this stud cavity as a return.
Yeah, like it's more costly to duct it, but it's not impossible. You know, it doesn't prohibit them from doing it. They just have to use the sheet metal products, you know, the oval duct in the wall stud cavities and their, you know, rectangular duct or square duct in the joist space.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay. So who's all in favor of disapproving this proposal? I'll vote.
Let me.
Oh,
Yeah. That's everyone. All right.
Yeah. I'm good.
Let's move on.
Yeah.
Good discussion, though.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
And therefore, I'd ask that, first of all, there's always a good thing, you know, follow up these with good policy, written policies. And Denver's usually been pretty good about publishing policies. I'll give you kudos for that. So just a policy here, we follow the IRC, not the, you know, the R40, whatever that was in the IECC.
I agree. This screams policy and maybe even defining between single family home and IRC townhome.
Yeah, that too. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do have a question on the townhomes. Are we talking about like maximum of 3 or more than 3?
I think 3 or more, because I think 2 would just be a duplex, and then so 3 or more would be R2, which would then become
Commercial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go to the next one. Pretty soon we're going to get to the ones I wrote, and hopefully those move faster. Number 7, M501.2.
I'm good with the next one if that helps. No.
So this is one that the proponent at the national level tried to fix an issue that he thought existed. Danny and I reached out to him through Shauna, and he was very upfront and just, I tried to fix something. But what this did is so he edited it to be domestic kitchen exhaust, which in table 403.3 is a required exhaust. Because in apartment buildings, there's either have the kitchen's now required to have a kitchen exhaust, and it could be a general exhaust in the kitchen, or it can be met with an intermittent fan over the range hood. Now the range hood section, the domestic range hood section, prohibits it or requires it to be ducted independently to the exterior. And so by changing this definition, the proponent inadvertently is now requiring that general exhaust in a kitchen to be independent as well. And so that would prevent it from being routed through an ERV or combined with a restroom exhaust. And so the intent of changing this definition back the way it is in the 18 code was to allow that general exhaust in kitchens to be combined with restroom exhaust and taken to the exterior in R2 units. So any discussion on this one, or are we ready to vote?
So range hood a better word than cooking? That'd be my only comment about wordsmithing this. Domestic's in that description, so domestic range hood, is that better defined elsewhere and therefore supported in the code?
So section 505 is where we wanted to directly tie the reference to. And so section 505 just talks about domestic cooking exhaust equipment. And so that range hood would be good for range hoods, but if there's like a downdraft exhaust or something other than a range hood, that would not be included in that. So the idea was just align this with the title of section 505.
Okay.
If we are done with the discussion, I'm in favor. So,
Yeah. So all in favor? Vote with hands.
All 6 hands. All right.
Okay, going on to the next one.
Chuck, I'm going to have to drop off.
All right, Louis, thanks for joining us.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Okay, so 507.1 was there's a new exception that's in the 2021 IMC for requiring type 1 hood exhaust. They've added this number 4, smoker ovens with an integral exhaust system, provided the appliance is installed in accordance with manufacturer installation instructions, is listed and tested for the application, and complies with Chapter 5, is an exception to requiring a type 1 hood. So we saw this and had questions on it. So we had Shauna reach out to the proponent and find out what the reasoning was. And the proponent response was that he intended this to address wood-fired pizza ovens. And since most wood-fired pizza ovens have a listed chimney that is allowed per NFPA 96. And so we didn't really feel like the code language that was adopted aligned with what the intent was. And then we also found that the code language that was adopted was a little confusing. Like, what does complies with Chapter 5 mean? And the mechanic, how would you comply with Chapter 5 if you're exempting portions of it And the chapter 5 is pretty specific that if anything wood fired needs a extra heavy duty hood. And in Denver, with wood fired pizza ovens, we allow the listed chimney or listed grease duct per manufacturer specs that is allowed by NFPA 96. So our suggestion is to just delete this exception to prevent confusion. And also to prevent other people from thinking that if they have a wood-fired appliance, that if the manufacturer says it doesn't need to go under a Type 1 hood, that there'd be a route for them to not have it under a Type 1 hood. Anything wood-fired should be under a hood.
Yeah, I think that's a good explanation. I'm good with that.
Okay.
Same here. The appliances are really tricky to deal with because you know, we got to comply with whatever the manufacturer says with regards to the appliance, and a lot of those recommendations are copied from a different appliance from 30 years ago. So, and then if the manufacturer says, "Oh, my appliance doesn't need anything," you know, that's not necessarily true. I mean, it's the same thing with the fireplaces. I mean, some of those guys are building them out of their garage. So, I mean,
Well, and
so I
in
agree.
addition, anytime, like our I codes are amazing how they keep referencing per manufacturer's instructions. Then you go to the manufacturer's instructions and they'll say hood not required unless required by authority having jurisdiction.
Right.
And so it kind of puts us at a interesting stance of like, well, does it or doesn't it? And so this was a spot where we just didn't feel like it was
The issue with pizza ovens, and of course the wood fired adds that next level of complexity to it, is that many of them are designed with, for lack of better words, an integral hood, right? I mean, they got a big old lip that hangs over. It's supposed to be nice and purty and look like the rest of the oven, and it really is intended to be like an eyebrow hood over the door of the oven. And you know what? I'm sure it works fine. The only question is the fire life safety from that point forward. You know, I'll accept that that integral lip over the opening captures oven effluent. It's just what do you do with it from that point forward. And now, having said that, would there be any confusion as to whether or not a wood-fired pizza oven assembly that has a integral lip, do I also need to go out and buy a stainless steel hood and install it over that?
You would if it didn't go out of the building through the chimney that's required in NFPA 96.
Okay.
So it's an either or, and if I were to modify this section, I would just say that it'd have to be in a chimney or a Type 1 hood, but we thought it would be clearer just to strike that confusing exception altogether.
Okay.
Yeah. And one thing we're starting to see is pellet fire equipment, much like a Traeger grill that we all have at home, like the idea of installing those underneath Type 1 hoods. And so the manufacturer specs I've seen so far on those leave a lot to be desired. And they're really pushing to not even have them under a hood, which I find surprising. And so, yeah, that's the intent by striking this. And obviously, if there's a good appliance out there at some other time, it can be definitely considered administratively. But just this with the general comply with Chapter 5 as well. Which sections of Chapter 5 apply if you're exempting the entire hood portion? So, so all in favor of this amendment?
There you go.
Keep it moving. All right.
Thanks.
I would have said no wood, period. I mean, or smoke ovens or no wood doesn't go together.
We're seeing interesting. There's a new company that's doing charcoal broilers, and so there's a restaurant like in South Wash Park that is charcoal chicken. I guess it's popular in Australia, and so it's starting to see that. So who knows? 607. Okay, so this is another proposal. The 2021 IMC had a couple exceptions added to static radiation dampers, and we struggled understanding how it would work or how it would function, especially understanding that most radiation dampers are spring loaded with a fusible link, and these seem to indicate all motorized radiation dampers. So Danny and I reached out to the proponent of this proposal at the national level and asked where these or how these would be applied, and they felt that they had very specific design situations where they envisioned these, mainly subduct systems at hotels or restroom exhaust in hotels. And after discussion, they really liked our language, and we're going to suggest it back at the national level of what we currently have in our amendments. And so the main intent of this proposal is to strike the new exceptions in the 2021 IMC and pretty much bring back our exception that when the fans associated with the heating, ventilating, air conditioning, or exhaust systems are interlocked to shut down during a fire, static ceiling radiation dampers may be used within the associated systems.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we're dealing with that issue, and I can give you some more information on that, Chuck. It just amazed me that exception number one, it sounds like a elevator guy wrote it. I mean,
Michael really likes elevator guys.
Yeah.
I mean, who is putting duct detectors and tubes? Oh my God, I just cannot believe it. App. So
Yeah.
check just app. We found a couple of manufacturers that they made the radiation dampers that they were dynamic.
Mhm.
And then for some reason they took down their listing. I don't know why, but we're like back to square one. But it is not very easy to shut down the unit. I mean, we are doing it, but yeah, I like this language a lot better. Mhm.
Yeah. And the idea was to also, instead of try to prescriptively tell the designers how to do it, to leave it open to design. So,
Mhm. Yeah, I agree.
okay. Everybody in favor of this proposal?
Yeah.
Aye. All right.
Take-
Excellent. Another quick one.
Yeah.
So this one was proposed by Brett Pica, who's a member of our mechanical plumbing plan review team. his amendment is to require electric duct furnaces shall comply with UL 1996 and shall be installed in the same duct as the fan. And so what he is seeing and what we've seen on a few designs is you have an exhaust in a room, like a small room, like a dog wash or something in an apartment building, and you have an exhaust from that room, and then there's a supply duct to that room that's just atmospheric with a electric duct heater in it. And so as the exhaust fan runs, it pulls air through that duct heater to heat the room. The challenge that is being proposed here is that when that door is open, obviously there's not going to be any air across that duct heater. And just this amendment will encourage and ensure that there's forced air across that duct heater.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen that design and it's recipe for disaster without a fan because it will burn the coil.
Right, we shouldn't be relying on thermal cutouts. So one thing I would suggest here is to limit some confusion with the wording in here says in the same duct as the fan, which means one fan, one duct, one pathway. To me, this could be in a branch of a larger duct system. We've done that before where you have a group like an outside air ventilation fan system where a portion of it needs to go through a duct heater before it goes to another piece of equipment. So perhaps this could read, "and shall be installed in the same duct system as the fan," so that it's receiving pressurized air.
Yep.
That's my thought.
That's a good one, Matt. I was trying to think of, what about, return versus supply but yeah, no, system. I like the word system.
Yeah, somewhere in the duct system. That I think is easy to interpret. Chuck, Danny?
I agree with that modification.
Okay.
Matt, my only concern is what happens is, let's say you have a 3000 CFM fan coil unit and you need like 100 CFM of outside air. Although we do say in our drawings, 100 CFM goes through this duct, sometimes it doesn't quite happen. So, I mean, at least our practice is if there's an electric coil, there's a fan, ahead of it. But I do understand that, if it's balanced correctly, it's supposed to flow that air through the coil because you need to have 100 CFM per kW or 100, or
right.
Yeah. So did I capture just in the same duct system as the fan?
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, let me bring up another one though, since that is an and to this sentence that starts with electric duct furnaces. And since this is not the IECC, so I'm allowed to use the G word here, right? Gas furnaces we're not addressing gas furnaces with this. So just break that sentence up and state that duct furnaces shall be installed with manufacturer instructions. I guess you just simply say duct furnaces shall be installed in the same duct as the fan. Electric duct furnaces shall comply with 1996. 3 separate sentences.
Yeah, I'm a little bit confused actually because that looks like specific to electric duct furnaces,
right?
And it's an electric coil sitting above the dog wash pushing 300 CFM. So it's not really a furnace. Wow, is it?
Oh hell, that was my IECC point. Is that they're trying, they like to restrict / ban gas furnaces, but electric things that make hot air or furnaces as well. I think the issue here for the mechanical code, not energy, is to simply keep gas or electric heaters from burning up. And therefore, let's just get rid of the and establish that as a standalone sentence.
You do it as a standalone sentence, or do you think we can put the and on the first sentence? Duct furnaces shall be installed. Ordinance with the manufacturer's instructions and shall be installed in the same duct
Sure.
system as the fan.
Yeah.
And then go that
That
route.
works.
All right, so let's. Okay.
I'm voting already,
Oh, okay.
but I'll let you call a question.
All in favor of accepting with
I-
or approving with modifications? Michael.
Jack, I do have a question. So chapter 9 is specific to fireplaces and solid fuel burning equipment. So is there another section specific to electric coils of some sort, or I mean, I do like it. I mean, I do agree with it. It just, I'm fearful it's going to uh, get specific to the furnaces versus to an electric coil and an auxiliary electric coil of some sort. Because if you say, oh, you can't do that, I'm going to say, well, it's not an electric, it's not a furnace. Chapter 9 doesn't apply. I don't know.
Well, I
if you
think it would fall under the specific appliances portion of the title of chapter 9. So chapter 9, specific appliances, fireplaces, and solid fuel burning equipment. So I think there are 3 separate items. So I think it would fall into the specific appliances. So they do talk about like furnaces specifically, floor furnaces, and then this duct furnace would be in there as well.
Right. And a duct furnace is, and I won't swear exactly what 1996 says, but this already implies that it's not a unit heater, right? It doesn't have a fan with it. So it's either a gas-fired thing that you slip into a duct, or it's an electric thing that you slip into a duct, and it doesn't have a fan. And that's why we're having this discussion, is because some people try to use a remote fan on it.
Yeah, when you look at the definition of duct furnace, it talks about in this code in the IMC.
Oh, good.
It says that this definition shall apply, or I'm sorry, a warm air furnace normally installed in an air distribution duct to supply warm air for heating. This definition shall apply only to a warm air heating appliance that for air circulation depends on a blower not furnished as part of the furnace. So in other words, it's a heater that's reliant on another fan. And the problem we're seeing is that people are not, they're relying on a fan that's not even connected to the duct system, which is the problem that we're trying to address here. The other definition for, there is a definition for furnace, but it doesn't say gas or electric. I've customarily associated furnace with the fuel burning, natural gas. But in the definition, it does not list that it is gas fired or otherwise fuel fired. So
Right.
And I think that section 911 is already trying to address both by having a section there that talks about electric furnaces in the first place. So it probably is the best place to put this.
Okay. Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah.
Well, in addition to the IMC doesn't cover gas appliances anymore. You need to go to the IFGC for anything gas fired.
I'm good. Thank
Okay.
you.
So we good to approve as amended? All right. Okay, so the next 3 proposals are to the IRC. And the intent is that currently in our mechanical code amendments, these amendments exist. And they're enforced for single family homes as well. But they're not directly in the it's not directly in the IRC currently. So this is just aligning the IRC and the IMC and capturing the way it's currently enforced. So in this case, like pellet burning appliances shall be certified by EPA. Essentially, like we don't allow new wood burning fires places to be installed unless they're EPA listed. And so this is capturing it now in the IRC to help align that.
Chuck, I don't have any comments if you guys are okay with it.
Yeah.
Here.
Everybody good with this one? Yeah. Or we're all good? All right. So this next proposal in the IFGC code amendments in Denver, we prohibit the use of copper piping to be used as gas piping, and then also identifying the testing methods for gas pressure testing isn't in the IRC currently. It's only in the IFGC, and so this is just bringing that code language into the IRC to help align the codes.
Chuck, the question I have is with the gas meters. It says gas meters shall not be located under any building unless the meter is located in its own dedicated, adequately ventilated vault. Is that an Excel meter or is that just a regular check meter?
It's intended to be the Excel meter, the main gas meter to the building.
I think we need to clarify that is the utility meter, and then Excel really governs that, and they don't really want it inside the building anyways. But sometimes it is under the building on an alcove.
So, I mean, this section is specific because this language is currently in our IFGC covering commercial buildings.
Mm-hmm.
This amendment proposal is only for single family homes.
Oh, I see.
So I don't think there would be a sub-meter associated with single family homes, and I would assume the meter would almost always be outside for single family homes. Just is clarifying that.
Okay.
I'm not sure the proponent for this is no longer with the city, so I don't know if he saw this or he's just worked to align the codes, which I appreciate the effort.
Yeah, it looks to me like an attempt to align the codes. You might have the discussion about, does IFGC cover commercial? I don't, and we don't have to if you do this, is the whole point.
Yeah.
And just one of the discussions I know that came up under commercial was, you know, the illustration was all those what used to be warehouses along Blake. A lot of gas meters got installed under the old loading docks, right? So, and there's other buildings like that, and and some of those are turned into, well, they're still commercial. It's not an SFR. We should have no objection to this. It's just trying to align codes.
Yeah, and it's not, and it won't change the enforcement either. I mean,
Right.
these are all things that we currently enforce
Right.
here in Denver. It's just now it's putting it in the right spot. So hopefully, single family home contractors, residential contractors can more easily find it. So, all in favor of this one? All right.
We got to spend 18 minutes on the last one.
Timing, I'm good.
I don't think we're going to spend 18 minutes on this one. Famous last words, but we'll see.
Okay.
So commercially in our fuel gas code, IFGC, we have unvented room heaters and open flame or radiant heaters shall not be installed or operated within dwelling units. And so this is moving that to residential for obvious safety reasons in Colorado. Now, the famous question commercially is always those alcohol burning fireplaces that they install in fancy condo buildings, etc. And honestly, those aren't really regulated by this fuel gas code. So it's it'd be more of a, I don't think that would prohibit those here.
Yeah, I'm good with it.
Yeah. Okay.
Agreed.
Everybody good with this one? All right.
Yep.
Unanimous. Well, we made it through all of them. We only have one that I need to go do more homework on, so that's good. I really